And 2 decks, again, we have not seen so far today. Break this down for me, Mason, who is here with me as well. Jeskai Tempo versus Gruul Valakut.
Yeah, Jeskai Tempo is your dream come true if you love Snapcaster Mage. This is a 4 Snapcaster, 4 Tamiyo deck. It's also got some Flasia, so a little bit of love from there as well. Basically, this deck is like I'm going to kill and counter most everything you do and then win with Snapcaster and Flasia beats. Meanwhile, if you're also from the back of the day, Drake, this was the first modern deck I really liked and had success with. This is Gruul Valakut back here. It has some updates with MH3. We have the Flare of Cultivation. That allows the deck to kind of jump ahead. But Spencer's someone who top-aided one of our modern events 2 events ago and is making a run at our leaderboard here and is off to a good start today at 3-0.
Yeah, playing a deck favorite of mine, I'm very interested in Spencer's success here. So I quite love Titan Shift as well. I did a little bit of work with it back in my day. And this one's still kind of keeping the same look as far as Primeval Titans in the deck. Scape Shift is in the deck. We've seen different builds of the Valakut deck start to move towards Wish. This one's staying true to form. Still got 4 One Rings, and like you mentioned, Flare of Cultivation that pair very well with the Arboreal Grazers. Really one of the better cards to sacrifice to that Flare of Cultivation. But a pretty modest start. As from the Jeskai side, you mentioned, try to kill and counter everything. Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student, one of the cards used to get ahead. A new one from MH3 has flying for 1 mana. Flying, and when it attacks, it investigates. Now, it has 0 power, so it does not do any damage, but it has to stay attacking if you want to stay investigating. If you draw 3 cards in a turn, you get to flip that one right into the Tamiyo Seasoned Scholar Planeswalker, which is kind of reminiscent of a Jace Architect of Thought, plus to shrink the team and minus to get some card advantage.
Yep. Spencer here, really likes playing this Gruul Valakut deck. It's kind of his go-to. He actually top-aided one of these Star City game events that happened right when MH3 was released in Modern as well. I believe playing this deck as well. So sort of his go-to deck of choice. Play a lot of different decks, but this is one that he has really liked the positioning of recently and likes the additions from MH3. So, a deck that we haven't seen a ton of, start to pop up here near the end of the format's lifespan, but, definitely has some real game to it.
Yeah, like I said, this is more of the same of true to form Modern. Like, even though these decks have a lot of new cards and a lot of new looks, this is really what I want to see out of Modern Horizon sets. Returns to decks that have modern pedigree, things like Titan Shift, things like a Jeskai Control deck. Of course, you can't forget about the Pro Tour Board of the Gods winner, Sean McLaren, and his Jeskai Control take. Everyone's really looking to relive those glory days if you're a Snapcaster fan. And so really MH3 kind of moving away from the elementals being the best thing to do and into this, something I love to see is here comes Flare of Cultivation, Olive Dryad, the Elysian Grove. Get a look at that. I believe it's just cultivate, right? 2 lands, 1 to hand, 1 to battlefield, but you can sack a non-token green creature to make that happen. So we are going to do that. Try to do some growth.
Yeah, and you see here Sam taking a second, 1, to read the card, make sure he understands what it's doing, and 2, he has Counterspell, and he's like, am I supposed to be countering this, or do I try and, counter the Scape Shift, which was something, there was always a little bit of trouble for these kind of Snapcastery bolt decks. Was like, okay, what am I supposed to fight over, right? Do I fight over the acceleration and hope you don't have more of those kind of cards? Do I just fight over the payoffs? Because as soon as Spencer plays a normal Valakut, Sam is going to be getting a lot of pressure his way and missed a land drop last turn.
Yeah, so that's really part of what makes this matchup interesting is you would think, okay, big ramp combo deck versus a deck with a bunch of counterspells, that should be really good for the deck with counterspells. You just counter all the big payoff and they lose. The Valakut deck is interesting because its primary combo functions by just playing lands. So if you're flooding out, you're out of spells, you're flooding out, you're only drawing lands, a lot of times those still represent lightning bolts that are uncounterable. You just play your land and whoopah, there's at least 1 lightning bolt, but there's 4 Valakuts in the deck, so it could be more. So even if you kill Primeval Titan after it's done its thing, or you just naturally draw Valakuts, it has a lot of play in these more controlling matchups, and that's something that Spencer may be looking to do. You mentioned Counterspell in Sam's hand. You can try to overpower them with your payoffs, but also eventually you're just going to start getting lightning bolts off your lands, and under no pressure to his life total is Spencer right now as Tamiyo continues to attack.
Yeah, Tamiyo sort of just being a clue generator here does enable some things like Flame of Anor, which is a 4 of here in Sam's list today. That is a powerful card from Lord of the Rings that, saw some amount of play, but people were like, oh, maybe this is what's going to make Snapcaster work, and it turned out to just be a really nice card in the Rhinos deck. It being played here kind of as intended, as just like this nice value card that sometimes you get 2 modes of, and has been a big motivator in these sort of blue-red controlling decks. As the One Ring, speaking of Lord of the Rings, comes on down.
Yeah, a lot of Lord of the Rings cards present, as long with the Modern Horizons cards, as Counterspell is going to take down the One Ring. So now this is really kind of the critical mass of mana the Valakut deck needs to start casting spells that need to be countered. And that is going to put some pressure on the mana that you would otherwise use to sacrifice these clues and draw cards. And with a Lightning Bolt follow-up to take care of Tameo, that really cleans up everything Sam has going on right now as far as snowballing advantage.
Yeah. Put Sam in kind of a weird spot here. I don't think he has anything else in hand that really applies pressure. I think he's also even just out of counter spells, but does have Flame of Anor, so you can use a little divination mode. And if Spencer doesn't have something like a Scape Shift or a Primeval Titan, it's not the end of the world. And even if we did Scape Shift, right now it would be lethal with an additional land drop, but we do need to have that additional land drop. So a lot has to go right.
Yeah, you have to have or a Dryad. If you have a Dryad,
yes.
Obviously that cleans everything up. But as you mentioned, right now that would do it. I believe he has Scape Shift, and I think Summoner's Pact in here. No, it's not Summoner's Pact. I don't know what. It looks like a green card. Can't get a good look. But it definitely has a Scape Shift. Definitely just drew a Wooded Foothills, so that does make Scape Shift lethal. But with your opponent passing back with 4 mana, I wouldn't be optimistic about that one resolving.
Yeah, and one thing we might see Spencer do here is maybe he'll play that other card in hand, which we weren't quite sure what it is. It might be the old
Acid Moss. And Sam leaning back in his seat. Long time no see for one Voli Acid Moss. Actually, there was a callback to this card in the new Modern Horizons set, but no, we're playing the original here. Destroy target land, search library for a forest, put that card into play tap. So this can grab the Surveil lands as well, then shelf your library. Sam says no thank you to that, as here's Snap Counter Spell. A smile from Spencer. So yeah, that was pretty good, isn't it? Back to Sam we go. Love the energy in these players.
Yes, and you're seeing here, Sam's like, okay, I'm going to lose my land. I got to get the Snapcaster Mage into play. And if you're Spencer, it's like, all right, well, I fought through a counter spell, but now there's a little bit of pressure, so you're not the happiest you've ever been. But in kind of still a fine position. And we know, Drake, that if he slams it right now, he's probably going to win.
Yeah, certainly. I think if we slam Scape Shift, we're in really good shape. A lot of burn available in hand for Sam, some Flames of Anor like you called out, but we might be running low on counter magic. And even if you're not, right, we're still making these surveils happen. This deck represents 4 copies of Commercial District, the Surveil land and its colors, and that's a big upgrade for this deck, which normally doesn't have a lot of selection, doesn't have really any way to set up its draws. Now, the primary thing it wants to be doing, putting red-green dual lands in play that are typed, it gets selection in that in the form of these Surveil lands, one of the biggest upgrades for this deck, as we've been a Wooded Foothills. And that's a fine thing. We're still 16 life in a good spot. Every spell we've cast the last 2 turns had to be countered. If we can continue that trend, you're eventually going to run out of counter spells. And it looks like that might be the case right now. Yeah, and
you see these sort of Jeskai decks, Bolt and things like that, very good against creatures. And we're going to see Spencer just take a minute here. From his perspective, Sam can have a lot of counter spells, and he's not under enough pressure just yet to pull the trigger.
If you're not playing lands, you have to have something, right? If you have to play lands, if it's just another counter spell, that kind of sucks. And right now we're almost at the spot where we can double spell. If you have 2 Scape Shifts, then you get to overpower the mana potentially. As Invert Polarity was picked up for Sam Clayton.
Yeah, and Spencer, someone pays attention to these sort of things, probably knows these Jeskai decks are full of counters, And once you see the actual deck, I think it has like 7 to 8 counter spells. And you've seen some online that play even like Archmage's Charm, which is even more. So, a lot picked up there, and Volt Polarity was the pickup. Now, that's a funny one. At this point, you're either going to counter the spell or take the spell. And taking the Scape Shift, I believe, doesn't really do very much. But it could help, Sam fix his mana a little bit. It's like kind of a
Surveillance or something. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. You might sacrifice your tap land to get a different Surveil land, get a Triumph out of your deck. We're going to see Spencer just cast the Flare of Cultivation here, just try and get up to Valakut mana. Valakut triggering on its own mana.
Right. And I think this is actually something else worth noting about the Valakut deck that kind of gets overlooked. A lot of times, newer players to formats with fetch lands think about fetch lands in random spots where there's not a lot going on.
There we go. And we're back.
We're back.
And so it looks like we had a little bit of a blip there. It seems like what maybe happened is, Sam drew some more cards, moved to discarded Wrath of the Skies. Doesn't really do much in this matchup. And Spencer just, got hit for 2 and is back to searching his deck.
Still at a happy 14 and still commercial districts left to fetch, and he certainly will, as here comes another one. And like I said, this is such a huge upgrade for the Titan Shift decks that normally in this spot could very easily just draw some lands. No Valakut's drawn yet, so dang, woe is me, and you lose the game. Now, we get selection. Every land we draw that's a fetch land now represents some piece of selection. You can further thin your deck even more by getting lands out of it. There's a lightning bolt. Don't really want that. Can put that right in the graveyard. Major upgrade for the Valakut deck, and great call by Spencer Calling, representing all 4 copies of Commercial District in this deck. As here comes Meticulous Archive, Surveil for Sam as well.
Yeah, and a thing to note here too about like everything going on is with the addition of Modern Horizons 3, one of the things that happened is we're seeing like decks change, and having an early counterspell plus some bolts interaction is actually pretty good, which is allowing things like Snapcaster to be good. We see Spell Snare there. That card very powerful against a lot of the decks that are sort of the perceived boogeyman of the format. So it's really cool to see what happens where sometimes there's this strong injection of cards and also brings back old cards, right? Shuko, kind of like a cheaty face example of that, right? But like Harsh Mentor is another card where it's like, oh, this does well. The context has changed. Now I get to be playable. And it's really cool to see that stuff happen as Sam just draws a bunch of cards at the end of Spencer's turn. And Spencer has to know if there wasn't a counterspell before, it is definitely, about time. As Bolt goes upstairs.
I think he's out of time. I believe that he's dead. I believe that the Snapcaster is about to attack for 2 points, which will put him to 6. And then they have the final 2 bolts in hand already and counterspell backup. So it's funny. Remember, if Spencer had just jammed the immediate turn instead of passing and trying to find a second spell, he would have, I think, won immediately, assuming his life totals are correct. And instead, now he's just dead. He doesn't know it, but he's just dead to 2 lightning bolts. As here comes the Scape Shift finally. Yeah, I think even Sam has 2 counterspells too, so he's got it covered every way.
Yep. I think Spencer did have he set up the double Scape Shift finally, but in Volt Polarity, it might make a copy, but it might also, I don't think Spencer has to cast he doesn't have to sacrifice a land. And
yeah, you could choose to sacrifice any lands. You can just sacrifice none if you want.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you're probably right from earlier. We'll probably sacrifice a Surveil land and grab another one if we have one left in deck. Might as well. This is a situation where you can roll the dice and say, like, evens is heads and odds is tails, right? Like, it is a sufficiently random way to do it. You don't have to actually flip a coin if you don't want to. And looks like as we head. So now that's Escape
Would you like to sack any lands? It's your Escape Shift now. No,
congratulations, Spencer, being the first person in coverage ever to get in Vote Polarity. A moment in history for sure.
Yeah, chooses not to sacrifice anything. And now, like I said, Sam has 2 bolts in hand. So I think we're just all done here, assuming these life totals are correct. This game is over. We're not there yet.
Yeah, it makes me think that maybe the life totals are slightly off. There might be like Spencer has 1 more life, and Sam, that's why Sam didn't fire off the bolts there. But, Spencer down to 4 now. I have to imagine after we take this draw, it is, triple check. We're going to see the bolts come on down.
Yeah, maybe looking for some counters, but I don't know. This could be anything. Ooh, looks like a Flage among the mix there. A little bit of Flage action. 4 of those.
Drake, I think one of them has Galvanic Discharge. It's just old bordered. When he picked this hand
up, we got old border bolts mixed with our old border discharges. Okay. Spencer might not be dead yet. But Flage plus bolt, I think, is enough. Yeah, all right, we did it. We did it all. I pulled 3 copies of Flage for Sam. Sorry, here we go. Yeah, there we go. Last lightning bolt. That's going to clean it up. And Sam Clayton winning game number 1 over Spencer Calling. Have to wonder how the game looks if he just jams Scape Shift the turn he had it. And, he worked through all the other counter spells. Put your last piece on the stack. Come on, Spencer. I don't know. We'll see.
It's a tough spot to be, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm under no pressure. Maybe I should just wait a little bit, right? Like we talked about, there weren't any land drops happening from Sam, so their spells. But in game 1, some of the spells were both. So maybe Spencer, that one might keep him up at night as we do check out his sideboard now to see what he'll do for game number 2.
I'm just rooting for Valakut, I admit. All right, let's take a look at the sideboard here for this take on Gruul Valakut by Spencer Calling. We got 3 copies of Veil of Summer, 2 copies of Endurance, 2 copies of Pick Your Poison, 2 Force of Vigor, 2 Curse of Shaken Faith, 2 Damping Sphere, 1 Ghost Fire Slice, and 1 Dismember. I tell you what, the Veil of Summers are sticking out to me as the best of the bunch. Anything else you would reach for in this particular matchup?
Yeah, I mean, you played this deck a lot more recently than I last did, so Veil of Summer definitely strikes me as a thing. I could also see Endurance coming in, depending on like
Sure.
how much of this wood elves type stuff you want to keep in, right? Like you could trim on that kind of thing, and then have Endurance, so Snapcaster Mage becomes a little less of a problem, and you can play some sort of medium beats. Maybe you bait a counter spell, and you're able to stick something like a Acid Maw or Escape Shift or whatever. Although I imagine Maw might be just coming out a little clunky these days, but lots of different ways to go with it there. Let's check out what Sam's doing.
Pretty simple as far as changes. A lot of different small changes you can make. Now here we go. We got the Jeskai Tempo deck featuring, as you mentioned, 4 copies of the Galvanic Discharge and all kinds of MH3 funness. Let's take a look at the sideboard, what we have to work with. We have 3 copies of Consign to Memory, 2 copies of High Noon, 2 copies of Force of Negation, 2 copies of Prismatic Ending, 2 Subtlety, 1 Mystical Dispute, 1 Invert Polarity, 1 Teferi Time Raveler, and 1 additional Wrath of the Skies. What changes are we making against Titan Shift?
So one of the cool things about getting to create really strong cards like Ugin's Labyrinth and a bunch of strong Eldrazi is we get to create some strong answer cards as well to fight those. So that being said, Consign to Memory is actually a pretty strong card in this matchup, designed to really sort of hate on the Eldrazi, but it can counter triggers. So specifically like a Valakut trigger, if you go for it on like an exactly 7, you could counter 1 or multiple because you can replicate it. Also counters the 1 ring. So I imagine we'll bring in 1 or 2 of those. You might not want the full 3, really depends on what you want to sideboard. These Galvanic Discharges, they're not super good, so I'm going to imagine those are going to go. You're definitely going to want your Force Negations. Those are premium in this matchup. And I imagine Invoke Polarity as a clunky counterspell, but a clunky counterspell. You have it, and you have a bunch of cards like Discharge, Wrath of the Skies. Wrath is definitely one you probably don't want. Maybe you're afraid of some pivot plan, but for the most part, you're up a game. You can probably risk to cut those and just, maybe leave in a Discharge or 2. But I imagine all of those cards are going to come in. And I'm really excited to see Consigned Memory here, Drake. This is a card, designed to kind of put pressure on these big mana decks and, doing it right now.
Yeah, I have to wonder too if Sam knows what's kind of going on in this matchup and knows that Primeval Titan is present. If there's any additional interest in subtleties and consigned to memories, because pretty good against the Primeval Titan trigger as well. If he knows it's there. Now, like I said, a lot of the Gruul Valakut decks are throttling back on Primeval Titan, so there's a good chance he's really only going for the Valakut trigger and stuff like that, which is fine. That's still very powerful, but it gets even better with the presence of Primeval Titan. So, like I said, a classic matchup with a lot of new looks. You talked about designing cards, answers, as well as threats. We get to see some of that at play here as these players shuffle up here for game number 3. Spencer Calling, as you mentioned, had some success on Gruul Valakut, down a game against Sam Clayton. His take, it's called Jeskai Tempo, but I would argue more of a Wizards deck with Snapcaster and Tamiyo and the Flames of Anor and all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think about what you said there a little bit. Subtlety, great call out. We know we have Titan. He doesn't. He might just bring those in because maybe he doesn't want. He wants to trim a Flage or 2, right? And he just wants to hold him up the whole game. And he's just like, yeah, it's a 4-mana 3/3 with flash and flying. That's good enough.
Good enough.
If I snag your Dryad, maybe that saves me from some weird Valakut triggers. And then he's gonna learn like, oh dang, I'm the goat. I just I got this.
I'm so sick. Yeah, if you get a Primeval Titan, like we're done. Like that's just so good. But it depends on exactly how much Sam Clayton knows about, I think, the Gruul Valakut deck, or at least assumes about the Gruul Valakut deck. Like I said, many of the current Scape Shift looks have been Scape Shifts with wishes to grab just Scape Shift. You're really kind of just doing that with the 1 ring, and more like Wrenn and 6. Like that's been the traditional look. This is a lot more return to true Titan Shift, and including Primeval Titan choosing to eschew the wishes and reaching for the old classic of Acid Moss. What?
Yeah, and Sam Clayton's part of Team Flex Slot here. He's got the little shirt on. And Flex Slot, helps us with some of our stuff, which is very nice of them. With the deck lists online are all through Flex Slot. But they're, playing all our events. They're very in tune with Modern. They're practicing a bunch. So I'm sure Sam, if someone's going to really know what's going on, it's going to be those players. They're really in tune with things. We saw Adam Wise earlier on coverage today, won the RC in Dallas, and is 2-1 so far going into this round today. So those players are in tune, and sometimes they do their own things. We see George Jabor, one of their players, loving to do Dark Days and doing.
Can't get away from it.
Yeah, but they're informed decisions, right? Like they might have things they bias towards, but there's a reason why they're doing these things. They try to make their plans work, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah, as again, this is all, you mentioned it a little bit. This is all context leading up to the Pro Tour, of course, in Amsterdam. This is something that I think there's a lot of eyes on this modern format, and it's kind of the way it's breaking out. And we've seen all kinds of different strategies being tested by players that are intending to be at the Pro Tour, as well as just NRG mainstays, people like Connor, people like Harrison Canford, that are really just looking to solidify their leaderboard position. While Spencer Calling among the mix as well. Looking to increase their leaderboard position and make some bids at the series. There's a lot on the line for these players that is both tangible on the prize slide and some intangible as far as testing goes and things like that. As looks like we have found a very low mulligan here for Sam Clayton. I believe 5 cards. Spencer kicking things off with a Wooded Foothills crack.
I think Spencer has Grazer on turn 1. And if he has Flay, I don't know, but if he has it, it'll be nice.
Yeah, that's part of the power of this kind of the Flare setup here. I think I saw Canister post a little bit about how he tried a million different things with the Flare cultivation, trying to make it work. Couldn't really figure it out. It's like, yeah, Grazer's like the only good thing to sack. And for Spencer Calling, he's like, well, that's fine. I'll just play Grazers. It's a card I want to play with anyway. And here comes the Surveil.
Yeah, the Grove Valakut deck is a special home for it too, because you can play cards like Wood Elves, which were like typically one-ofs that you could like sometimes pack for in weird spots, and it was like a card that was reasonable back in the day. And now, with Flare Cultivation, it's a lot more reasonable, right? Like suddenly you get that land plus the ability to turn it into another one. So, Spencer really far ahead here on mana, and a little bit of card advantage there for Sam as he bins the Flays.
Flays to the bin with the Surveil lands. Talk to me. Back to turn 2 we go, starting off with a Farseek. This one also got an upgrade thanks to the Surveil lands. Can go get a little bit of extra bang for your buck. Could already grab the shock lands and things like that, but it had to enter tapped. Had no option for it to enter untapped. So why not get a Surveil for your trouble?
Yeah, the Surveil lands have been very big players in Modern. And like you said, for decks like this that have low agency over their draw steps, and just sort of are like, well, the top of my deck's top of my deck. I can't really do much. I can just be as redundant as possible. These are huge gets. And with, cards like Farseek, where you're going to have to get tap lands anyways, it really takes away that drawback of like, oh, well, maybe like it will enter, like tap all the time's bad. It's just going to already be that way. So really smart innovation there from Spencer and Valakut players in the whole to adopt these things wholesale.
Yeah, and like I said, it's looked really clean. And honestly, Spencer looked like it was a really competitive game 1. It was really close. And, things could broke one way or the other. It wasn't really, it looks like this deck's back. We are so back as Titanship players. As here comes the Flare of Cultivation. That one's for free. Cha-ching, as Arboreal Grazer hits the bin.
And I love this play from Spencer. He could have used mana, right? Like we have a bunch of mana. I'm not even sure we have a follow-up. But if Spencer maybe has some like a Valakut in hands and wants to actually make the land drops, then this is a great play because Sam is like, well, I can't counterspell this. I might get the 1 ranked and I'll just lose the game, right? And so Sam's kind of like forced into a position where he probably has to let this card resolve, which Spencer, as we saw in game 1, is fine to just let the lands develop. He knows on average he'll find a way to get a Valakut in play and then take over the game.
Right. And holding the fetch land certainly speaks to that as well. Well, maybe not. Maybe we have some other kind of follow-up is Wooded Foothills. Typically you hold those. If you have a Valakut in hand, you want to hold those as long as possible because they represent instant speed Valakut triggers that can help with all kinds of various problems when you need a bolted instant speed that's uncounterable. Here he's fetching proactively, did Flare. I don't believe he's played a land yet this turn, so still have a land drop available, 4 mana available. 1 ring? It's Acid Boss time. Oh, yeah. You have 2 lands. I have 5. What about 6? And you go to 1. How does that sound? I love the shoulder movement there from Sam as he casts turn the narrative there. Tune the narrative to draw a card, make 2 energy. Yeah, that doesn't counter Acid Boss, and neither does the consigned memory he has in hand. So away goes his land. Another one coming for Spencer.
Yeah, and this is like, this is sort of what we talked about before, right? Like if Sam had tapped out there with the counterspell, and assuming he had it, obviously he didn't, it would have been, just game ending. And Spencer did a really good job of setting this up here and also just sort of calling, right? We saw last game, he sort of held onto his spells a little bit, but this game is like, no, Sam mulligan to 5. I'm not threatening lethal. Let's just, get those lands.
I mean, it's good if you do, if you don't. If you counter it, don't care. I mean, this is like not that high value. If you do counter it, or sorry, if you don't counter it, you're down to 1 land. Like your deck doesn't play a ton of lands, and now here's my 4th Surveil land, so I'm just getting the cantrip while making my land trips. I have 7 mana, you have 1. Well, let's play Magic.
Yeah, you see Spencer and Sam laughing there about the 4th commercial district, Spencer's in there. He's shopping. And
he's doing a lot of shopping. I don't know what the flavor is there, but he's certainly shopping.
Well, he just hasn't found something he wants yet. He keeps binning it, it's just
sure, right, yeah. The One Ring, that's something he wants. That's a nice find at the jewelry store, as we're going to try to counter the protection ability, I believe, on this one.
Well, you can counter the spell. It counters colorless.
Because it's colorless, right? We can counter the spell. We have a second one, so don't worry about that. Sam shakes his hand. Yeah, that's not going to be good.
Yeah, you can replicate Consign, but unfortunately it doesn't hover on the stack for the next one.
It doesn't stick around. Yeah, it doesn't produce another one in your hand. It's not buyback. All right, let's look at this one. Triggered ability or colorless spell. So yeah, that one does get even more mileage countering the One Ring, but second copy of One Ring means that we are getting through with our draw.
Yeah, cards like Ceremonious Rejection, didn't see a ton of play. So giving them a little extra juice like this is a great way to help give more texture and back and forth in these games, especially when you're giving those decks very powerful cards. Getting something like this is super nice. Even being able to consign to memory the Storm trigger can matter against, Grape Shot. Suddenly you're not getting hit for a bunch, Maybe they could go back and do it again, but sometimes they aren't able to do that. And now your sideboard cards get a little extra mileage. So sort of a nice tool players have unlocked.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see if it's going to be good enough against the 8 mana Spencer Calling and One Ring versus 3 mana. Speaking of so back, here's Mystic Gate, Filter Lands back in play for players. That's how you know Modern has healed. We are over to Spencer. Going to take a damage, but life total to no pressure means this One Ring is primed to clock in and go to work. 2 more cards coming for Spencer Calling, down from no hand to 5 cards, I believe is the math.
Yep. This really reminds me of that meme online where it's like, you hit your head a little hard, bro. You're okay. What's a grief?
What's grief? What happened? I just want to acid boss some people.
And Sam here, Force and Volt Polarity. Now, if he wins the flip here, like we talked about before, he might end up sacrificing, this Filter land to go get a Surveil land.
Yeah, I mean, I'd sacrifice something. It looks like it was just countered, and so nothing there. Chooses not to cast the Flare of Cultivation in his hand. It does have a mountain in his hand. Back over to Sam Clayton we go, but the One Ring is still in play, and Flame of Anor says destroy target artifact. One Ring's indestructible, so that's not going to solve any problems here.
Yeah, Sam's going to need a Shadow Spear, I think, to unlock some... I guess Shadow Spear doesn't remove indestructible. It removes Hexproof, excuse me.
Hexproof, yeah, I believe.
Yes,
well,
yes.
No, because it's supposed to kill gods, right? It has to remove indestructible, too.
Yeah, it probably does. Anyway, Sam, that's some free advice. Maybe the Shadow.
I'm trying to get the flavor going. Because here is Valakut added to the mix. That's an important land drop for Spencer Calling, because now any mountains played are going to start bolting right away. We know he has a basic mountain in hand. He has a Flare of Cultivation he held in his hand as well. That's a lot of damage. I don't know if he has lethal yet, but just ramp spells are starting to look close to lethal.
Yep. And, this is a really good position for him. And this is sort of kind of what we saw him trying to, set up in game 1, right? Where Sam had enough answers and had the Snapcaster put pressure on. But now Spencer's just like, hey, I don't have to do anything. You don't have a ton of pressure. And I can outrace my own One Ring when it comes to damage.
Yeah, so call me when you're going to cast something. Like, yeah. I don't have to move. I'll draw 100 cards. It's fine with me.
Mm-hmm. And so, Sam trying to, get some pressure on the board is going to be his number one priority, but it's so hard when there's all this pressure on you. And, Spencer even has a Veil of Summer here. So the moment he finds something like Scape Shift, we might see that come down. It looks like he also thumbed an Endurance to the front of his hand.
Man, I'm so into this. This deck is so sweet. This Valakut deck, I don't know. I might have to hit up some NRGseries.com for some singles after this show. I'll tell you what. Whew.
You should definitely do it.
Nerd Rage. I think it's nerdragegaming.com. I think NRG Series does take the series, and you can filter through, whatever.
Yeah,
a plug nonetheless.
Yes, there.
This here is land number 5, but again, we have no pressure.
I'm sorry to laugh. It's just so funny. Sam's hand of all blue spells and Sacred Foundry. It's just like...
That's why we didn't sack the Mystic Gate. That card's clocking in, going to work. The Sacred Foundry's not doing any favors. 2 Snapcaster Mages on the Preordain. Well, the pressure.
Yeah, I think you're low-key forced to keep at least 1, just because you need to do your damage, and you're probably your best bet of winning is hoping Spencer just literally draws all lands, and the One Ring does a ton of damage, and you go bolt, snap, bolt.
How does this Jeskai deck ever beat the One Ring? You just have to counter to you lose in the spot. This looks bloody.
Yeah, I imagine that's it. You could have, something like Static Prison to answer it. This deck does use energy. But like that is definitely not, like if you're wondering even gets, 1 or 2 turns of being active, sometimes that can be enough.
Does Wrath of the Skies ever get it?
Well, it's indestructible, right? Is the problem.
So right, it's destroy. It's not like
I believe Wrath of the Skies is destroy. I don't think we went with exile.
Okay, well, that one doesn't do it. All right, I guess you just have to race it with bolts and stuff. Maybe that's a fine plan for some people, but Sam is not finding the lightning bolts right now. It's Tamiyo finally added to the board on turn 5. That one not on time. And Endurance, I believe, coming down here on end step. Doesn't represent much, but cleaning up the graveyards makes that Snapcaster we just drew a lot worse. But if you counterspell this, you're untapping, Spencer gets to draw 4 cards off the One Ring, and then what happens? Like, not a good spot to have only 2 mana up if you're Sam Clayton. This the Acid Moss being felt here many turns later.
Mm-hmm.
Countered is Endurance. Now shields are down. 3 damage for Spencer. Happy to take that. And to draw step we go. 4 more cards available if he wants it. And I can't imagine Sam's getting another turn.
Yeah, I think this is... Yeah, this is tough. From Spencer's perspective too, like he could have Veil Summered that. Plenty of mana, could have got a redraw, could have got the pressure, but just knows that's not what the game is about and wants to fight over cards like Force and Negation if those are there. So you see Spencer really trying to sculpt himself. Picked up a Primeval Titan and plays a Valakut.
You're a 10. I think you can just kill him with land drops. Like if he has a fetch land, he's dead. Yeah, okay. Here's 6 more. And I can just fetch. It also just has Primeval Titan and the works in hand. So that game won by miles thanks to the One Ring. Spencer Calling is going to steal game number 2. I say steal, but he just played cards and they lined up well. So it's not really like he stole anything. He just the cards lined up there well in game 2. And to game 3 we go. Let me take another quick look at the sideboards. We see not a ton of sideboard changes, I think, from either player. Veil of Summer had a potential to be a major player, and we did see Endurance in the deck. That was something you kind of called out as like maybe we want, maybe we don't. We did see he's interested. The Snapcasters as a 4X makes the Endurance makes more sense. If you can pitch cast, really disrupt a counter spell, that's going to be very meaningful. But outside of that, didn't see any kind of Blood Moon's effects that would make you want Pick Your Poison or Force of Vigor, and not really under enough pressure to justify any removals like the Slice of the Dismember. I don't even know if you want to keep the Endurance in. Maybe in game 3, just I want to do -3 bolts, +3 Veil of Summer, ship it.
Yeah, I think that's super fair. And I also think maybe there's some amount of play draw discrepancy here, right? Getting an early Endurance down before your opponent counterspells. Like if you go turn 1 Grazer, turn 2 just slam the Endurance in your main phase, pass. Now, Sam's like, oh, I can't kill that unless I have 2 bolts, or have some.
You can't even attack with Tamiyo anymore. So that's probably actually pretty good.
Yeah, okay, so I can on the play, I can totally it appeals to me a bit more. On the draw, I totally understand where you're coming from too. Of maybe I just want to go fast and just put back in my ramp spells and try and steal the play back. And now I'm just not going to even have this card. So really a lot of different play to it, and that's one of the cool things I love about Modern is even with a deck like this that is very linear and focused, there is some delineation, right? And you and I can talk about this with a little bit of there's a little bit more than meets the eye, and it's so cool to see as our players are drawing their hands for game number 3 here.
Yeah, we saw a lot of the sideboard cards there from Sam were shaped in the same way as Consigned to Memory and Invert Polarity. Didn't really see any kind of subtleties or anything like that. A lot of the Flame of Anars and stuff like that did stay in. They represent the ability to kill Primeval Titans and Dryads as well as just draw cards, even if the Destroy Artifact mode, not great. Do just kind of want to have ways to get some card advantage if you're holding up your mana every turn, and Flame of Anar does provide that. Now, I have to wonder, too, the spell snares that are in Sam Clayton's deck, do they have any targets? Typically you're like, okay, I want all my counter spells. I don't think spell snare is. There's 2 of them.
Yeah,
I think they have no targets.
It's Farseek, and I think that's it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really not that super good. Now, we did talk about how Sam has a bunch of cards that he probably doesn't want. And so we might end up seeing it just because he cut 1 but couldn't figure out how to cut 8 or 9 cards, Sometimes, especially in a deck like this that is powerful but not as popularly played, you might end up having a little bit of awkwardness occur because you just can't build your sideboard to beat everything.
Right, that's exactly where I was going. Is it looks to me like Sam is really actually kind of unprepared for the matchup, just kind of trying to find cards that happen to line up less so than surgically targeting this deck. And that can contribute a lot to Spencer's success so far. I mean, I think his deck is really smartly built, and I think a lot of people are not going to be ready for it. And things like the Acid Moss give you a lot of game against the new face of the Tron decks, these Colorless Prison decks and things like that, able to just pick off a land and ramp you. That's a big deal in that matchup. I think there's a lot of really smart decisions he's made, and he's set himself well both in this matchup and at the metagame at large. At 3-0, looking to make a pretty deep run at our leaderboard, kind of on the outside looking in of a lot of the leaderboard payout right now, but a deep run here in a showdown. As we saw with Dom, it only takes one weekend. You can win both events, and suddenly you're at the top of the leaderboard. And Spencer setting himself up nicely to do that as both players leading on tap lands. Thundering Falls for Sam, Valakut for Spencer.
So from Sam, when he was searching his deck, I took a little look-ski-poo, Drake. We have all the Galvanic Discharges still in the deck. So it looks like Sam decided to fight that fight and wants to maybe be able to stop the Dryad from accelerating mana or, being early Valakut stuff, which makes a fair bit of sense too, like we talked about this there. But I didn't see any spell snares. So it looks like those left the deck, and we kept in the Discharges, hoping just to line it up well.
Well, and they line up maybe okay against Grazer. Grazer's actually kind of annoying. Like, if you're trying to do Snapcaster beatdowns as your primary way to win the game, a random Grazer sticking around could be worth 6-8 life. And that's a really big deal if you're trying to be a Jeskai tempo deck, as the deck name claims to be, as here comes Farseek. No spell snare for that one at the ready. Just the Rogrin Triumph still tapped. And so Commercial District number 1 hitting the board for Spencer. And once again, I called out that Spencer's deck plays all 4. We've seen already in this match all 4 in play at the same time. This is a deck that I'm not confident. If you could play Infinite, I don't know how many it is, but I'm thinking like it's 5 or 6. Like, you would play more than 4 of Commercial District if you could. You have so many ways to find it.
Yeah, I almost wonder if the deck should splash one, right? Just be like,
Sure.
like the red something, and just you got another Surveil land. Format probably a little fast right now with Nadu and Ruby Storm, probably might be a little dangerous, but I could totally see that the metagame moves in a more direction of like Sam's deck or something like, a controlling shell. That could be a great meta call for these Valakut players. And once again, a lot more than meets the eye here when it comes to this. Now, Sam, you did see ask Spencer cards in hand, wanted to make sure. That's because he has the Force Negation, so he does have a free quote-unquote counterspell that he can afford to tap out on one turn and have an answer to something like the One Ring or Escape Shift.
Yeah, I think we see actually a few free. I think there's a Subtlety in hand as well. So multiple pitch cards available for Sam, which is strong, but their pitch cards like those are most strong alongside Pressure. I mean, the Delver of Secrets being the face of that style of gameplay for so many years in Legacy. In this format, maybe it's more Tameo shaped, but typically you want some kind of advantage, either life total cards, whatever, that goes along with these. That's really a missing piece for Sam right now. So even though those pitch cards are going to buy him time, he's going to get more time for sure. He's not going to just die out the gate. We're setting up for a long game here as here comes basically Cultivate. Like, it's just, one green Cultivate looking to ramp a little bit. And now the question is, do you counter this? You're loaded on counter spells. You have counter spell, all kinds of stuff. Do you counter it? The answer is apparently yes. As you look at Flare of Cultivation, a callback to Cultivate, which finds two basic lands, puts one in tap, one the other in hand.
Yeah, I think Sam, that was the turn he needed to play a Flage. I know it's scary. It's the One Ring turn. You have the Force Negation. I think that is your way of winning, and you just have to tap out, let Spencer do whatever rampy thing he wants, counter the One Ring if that comes down. On the next turn, hope that you can fetch, get back your Flage on the following-ish turn, and then start pressuring, because if you give Spencer infinite time, you're going to be in trouble. And honestly, Sam, game 1 of round 1, I'm sorry, of this round, excuse me, got a little lucky, right? Spencer maybe played a little bit too safe for a little too long and kind of snuck out a win. And that's a matchup that I think is pretty tough for him. And I think in these kind of matchups, you just have to take risks when you can afford to.
Yeah, I think I agree with your analysis almost entirely. This is a matchup where you really just need pressure. The Gruul Valakut deck with all of its powerful spells has a lot of inevitability. So even if you stop some of the early mana, even if you are able to stop the first couple payoff pieces, generally things will start to overwhelm you as the game progresses. You really need to highly value those early Flage, casts, those early Tameos. Things like that are really important for getting this matchup going in your favor, because you can stop the few first things, but it may not be enough to stop long term. You need a way to actually get ahead, slam the door in the game, or the Valakut deck will just overpower you over time.
Yeah, and we're seeing, this Flage getting stuck in Sam's hand, and it only gets more worse, right? Last turn, there wasn't a ton that Spencer can do. Well, now we're on 4 mana, so now we're even setting up things like Veil of Summer plus the One Ring, or Wood Elves into something like Flare of Cultivation. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Spencer wants to play this game. And Sam here, has a subtlety, so he's really hoping Spencer does something like a Dryad of the Elysian Grove. But if he doesn't, he might just be forced to, make that be a 3/3 and start putting pressure on Spencer.
Yeah, this is the dream here for Sam. Being able to tag, very quickly going to fetch. Being able to tag a Dryad is the best possible because you want to put subtlety into play anyway, get a real threat cooking. And Dryad is the best hit at this stage of the game for just stopping what Spencer has going on, making the trigger worth a real card, getting a 2-for-1 while establishing your clock. Like you said, if he doesn't play a Dryad, if he plays any other ramp spell, really, we're in a spot where you kind of have to flash it in as a threat anyway for the most part. Otherwise, the game's just continuing to slip more and more out of your favor as, the life total remains high for Spencer. So this was more or less the dream for Sam. Now, I don't see a Veil of Summer. I see Farseek, a couple Valakuts, and a Primeval Titan among the mix. So we might just keep this Dryad on top with all of these Valakuts.
Yeah, Valakut, Mountain, Titan, Farseek. Yeah, so I think with those cards, Spencer's pretty incentivized to just put the Dryad on top. It might get counter next turn, but you can just play your Valakut this turn, and then next turn do something like Dryad into Farseek. Looks like he's going to just develop the Mountain right now, wants to get the actual Mountain count a little higher. Which makes sense,
getting the natural Mountain count higher makes some sense if you do end up in a spot where you want to play Primeval Titan. We'll see. Let's see exactly how he wants the sequence. I do think, you have so much time that I think you do want to reach for Dryad, which almost certainly is going to get met by Counterspell. Snap Counterspell looks like a really good turn for that. If I'm Sam, but
I think. Wait, does Sam have a tune plus discharge? I think he does, which he can respond to the Valakut trigger because it checks upon resolution, as you and I both know. I'm sure getting blown out a couple times here, and he can make some energy and then kill the Dryad.
Right.
And that means he gets to save his snap counter, which is huge.
A big deal, because then the Primeval Titan's dialed up. But unfortunately, he will lose subtlety still, because even if this Dryad dies, Spencer can cast Farseek and go grab another Mountain. And then that will actually take care of the subtlety, which does take care of the clock. So even though this exchange is going to work out well for Sam, there's a potential. Yeah, so we're getting a look here. 3 energy, but we got 2 more from the tune the narrative. And that means that we have 5 energy. We can spend 4 to kill that. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, that should not have happened.
Looks for 6 other mountains, right?
It looks like the judges caught it.
Oh no, it looks for 5 other mountains.
So yeah, we're 1 short, I believe, right now. I believe
no, I don't.
Because there's
you are 1 short because it was a mountain that was played, not the Valakut. If you play the Valakut, you're not short because it counts itself as a mountain and then sees the 5 other mountains. So yeah, there we go. Look at that one. It says at least 5 other mountains. So you have to have 5 other that it still sees on resolution. So if Valakut no longer becomes a mountain, it still sees 5 other as the 6th. And the trigger still works, but it does not work there. But the Farseek, as we called out, will work. So Farseek, go find Commercial District, which is a mountain, which is your 6th mountain, which will trigger Valakut, kill subtlety, and give you a surveil.
Yep. And, Sam here has held on to this Flage the whole game, has Snap Counterspell lined up as well, but, is getting really under a lot of pressure now as the Valakut
can't cast it, right? Because Primeval Titan, Force Negation doesn't get it.
Yeah, exactly. And Sam hasn't seen Primeval Titan the whole match, so he might think the Force Negation is good enough. And he might, this is like, okay, I've got to, pull the trigger on this now so I can actually get it out. But because we waited on doing this, I think we might get got here if Spencer goes for something like Titan. If Spencer goes for something like Escape Shift.
It's Primeval Titan, and Force Negation doesn't get that.
Yeah.
Oh, and the shake of the head from Sam, who realized we haven't seen Primeval Titan yet. And it's not normally even played in these decks. Force Negation saves you against 1 ring. Escape Shift, not Primeval Titan. And look at him flicking the Galvanic Discharge. We don't have enough energy, right? We only can get the Force, so we can't even kill it.
Okay, now. I think we can still win, though, Drake.
Okay.
All right, so here's where we're at. We're at 20 life still right now, thanks to Flage, thanks to everything. So Spencer can't kill us this turn, right? He can dome us for a lot, but on our turn, we can Galvanic Discharge the Titan and then put Flage into play with Force Negation backup. And so if another Titan...
land if we grab 2 Valakuts. So if we grab 2 Valakuts, the fetch land is worth 9 damage.
Yeah, but...
And you have to fetch.
but we already played our land for like the fetch land is the land, so you're able to do 12 damage here, right? Because you can get Valakut plus fetch land, or Valakut plus land. That's
Valakut Mountain,
6.
yeah,
Yeah,
6.
that puts Sam down to 12. I'm sorry, 14. Excuse me. Then you fetch, that puts Sam down to 8. So Sam's not dead, and we can actually kill the Titan because Galvanic Discharge is in hand.
But then any land is 6 more damage.
But Flays will gain you 3 life. So I think Spencer the game's going to last a little bit, and what might end up happening is Spencer's going to end up having to double Valakut down the Flage, so it doesn't attack. But I think unless Spencer draws like a Primeval Titan, Sam might be able to steal this game.
Yeah, because like any Flare cultivations, you have to force negate them, but that still works. And that's meaningful. Spencer at 11. I mean, that life total is pretty low. You mentioned Flage does kill pretty quickly. So there is some hope left for Sam Clayton, even though things look to be really, really precarious right now.
Yeah, he is on a razor-thin edge. That Attune actually, if we didn't have the Flage, Attune plus Discharge here actually kills the Titan. As it would, put it up to 6 energy. And it looks like Sam's going to actually go that route instead of doing the Flage line. Maybe
this
wants
leaves
to
up Snapcaster so that maybe you can get Snapcaster in plan and step.
Only if you draw land, but yeah, I don't think he didn't hit the land. But now we have Galvanic Discharge that kills the Titan.
Right.
Yeah. And
I think he sees it. I think he sees the line. I think he sees he could have discharged plus Flage, and that would have been money. And now we have to discharge and not put anything in play. Now, this does leave up Hardcast Force Negation, which means you don't have to pitch the Snapcaster, which means maybe you can get a little bit more threat. But I mean, your line sounded great to me. And I don't know if there's a reason not to, but based on Sam shaking the head, I think he saw it a little too late after the tune was already on the stack and cast. And I think he's a little shake there. I mean, a tough shot. Having Primeval Titan against just Force Negation, a lot to disrupt what's going on in your mental processes. As here comes a Commercial District. This one, is this number 4? We did it again. All 4. Surveil is going to happen here for Spencer Calling. Going to get a look. 6 damage to 7. And on top goes the card. Oh, can't be excited about that if you're Sam Clayton. It's a mountain, which puts him to 1.
And this is sort of the awkward part for Sam too, right? Is now land drops are
kill you. Every draw is good. Lands kill you. Any spell is a must counter, and everything of that ilk.
And if we had put the Flage into play, right, we'd be up 4 life, and then the actual land drops would not kill us. And so the Valakuts probably would have had to have hit Flage, which buys you another turn. So Sam, really wants Spencer to draw spells. That's what it comes down to. He wants him to draw non-creature spells. Yeah.
Well, now is Force Negation even up anymore? So
I believe we drew another. I believe we drew a Flame of Anora off.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not 100% positive, but also you're forced. You have to put Flage into play. The Titan of Fire's Fury is here, and I do see the Flame.
Dead on board. Dead on board, and land is lethal. A lot of lethal. Yeah, knock the top of the deck. A lot of lethal draws. Scape Shift. That one can be countered. Force Negation, pitch Flame of Anor. Lethal on board with the Flage. Sam gets bailed out.
Yep. And
a shake of the hand.
Well played, by both players there. A lot of decisions, a lot of different ways it can go, and they navigated it both very well, putting themselves in good positions to win. And, congratulations to Sam moving on to 4-0. Spencer's still very live for our top 8. We're doing 8 rounds today. Could very easily rattle off 4 more in a row. We saw him do it last time. He can do it again. We're going to take a quick break, though, Drake, as our round is this is one of the last rounds going on. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes. So get some water and stay tuned.